Let me ask you something that might be a little bit uncomfortable. If you closed your doors tomorrow to your facility, not forever, just for, call it 60 days, how many of your athletes would still be waiting when you opened your doors back up? How many families would actually wait for you? And how many would just move on? I think the most dangerous place that a facility can be in, it's not struggling, it's being busy without being irreplaceable. Stick with me on this because that question is exactly what this video is about. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Dave Bartek. I've built and scaled a 7-figure facility here in Atlanta, Georgia. We took our operation from absolute ground zero to a 10,000 square foot facility that we're proud to say is now doing 7 figures and employing 12. On top of that, we've helped several of my own former employees go out and start their own facilities. I've been in the trenches on this stuff for nearly 10 years now. Started out in a corporate career, got back into coaching and coaching travel ball and high school players, and then started training athletes at private gyms until I got kind of tired of that and wanted to open up my own training facility. So when I talk about this stuff, it's not just theory, it's the stuff that I've actually lived out over the past decade. Now I help facility owners just like you build real businesses, not just jobs that happen to involve baseball. We create the systems that it takes to build true revenue, maximize profitability, and most importantly, having the opportunity to have a wealthy career in owning and operating your own facility. Now back to that question. How many of your athletes would still be there if you closed your building for 60 days? The answer tells you almost everything about the actual strength of your facility as a business. If your honest answer is, most of them would wait, then you've probably built something real. And if that's truly the case, then okay, I've got some guys that are committed to this. You have genuine leverage if that's the case. And you've got athletes and families who are bought in, not just to your programming, but to you and the culture that you've built and what you're standing for. If the honest answer is that a lot of them would probably just find another place to train or find somewhere else to go work out, that's not necessarily a failure on your part. That's just information. And it means that the relationship between your facility and your athletes is still mostly transactional. They're there because it's convenient, or because you're pretty good at what you do, or because the price works out. And those sometimes can be pretty fragile reasons. And this video isn't about marketing or ads or revenue tactics or any of the fancy business stuff that you guys hear about. It's about the thing that actually has to come before all of that. And that's genuine value, and how building that genuine value is actually the path to real leverage, real staying power, and real wealth inside your facility that we all are trying to build, right? There's a conversation that happens in this industry, and I've been a part of it, and it's about how to compete for better equipment, for lower prices, for more cage time, for the fancier facility and all the bells and whistles, for better social media presence, and on and on. And look, some of that stuff matters. The presentation matters. Your facility should look good. You should look good coaching. Your content should be solid. All of that's real, guys. Like that's not bullshit. But here's what I've learned, and here's what I've watched happen over and over again. Facilities go head to head on those kind of external factors, and it kind of turns into a race to nowhere, because there's always someone with a newer, shinier, fancier building or piece of equipment. There's always someone willing to undercut your price and go cheaper. There's always someone with a bigger Instagram following and more social media power. And the truth is, if your competitive advantage is something that someone else can buy or copy, it's not really an advantage anymore. It's just a feature, and features are temporary. You're not going to be able to out-equipment a facility that out-cares you, if that makes sense. You cannot out-market a facility that has deeper relationships than you do. The real race in this thing is about value, not value in the marketing sense. I mean actual, genuine, felt value from your athletes. The kind where a parent watches their kid walk out of your facility on any given night and thinks, man, these people actually give a damn about my son. They care about what we're doing here. That feeling when you consistently create that, it's not something that a competitor can actually replicate overnight. Like, they've got to go figure out how to do that on their own. It takes time, it takes intentionality, it takes culture. And once you've built it, it becomes the most durable, competitive advantage that you can have as a facility owner. I've watched facilities with old, burnt out equipment and tight spaces and nets falling apart hold on to athletes through everything. Through COVID, through tough times, through going broke, and competing facilities opening up down the road, and new pricing pressures and all of it, because the relationships were real. And I've also watched these slick, fancy facilities with all kinds of funding and great equipment lose athletes constantly, or worse yet, never even attract them because there's no relationship and experience that is felt when guys go there. It's just simply a transaction. So I'm going to get kind of specific here, because providing value is one of those phrases that gets thrown around a whole bunch and it starts to mean nothing. And I'm probably guilty of it too. I always throw that around to my team. We've got to provide value. So let me tell you what it actually looks like in terms of our culture that we've built, and what I see it looking like in facilities that are actually winning right now. It starts with one thing, and that's relationships that go well beyond a lesson or a package or any other program that you offer. The coaches at your facilities should know your athletes, not just their mechanics and what they look like, but their lives. What grade are they in? Whether they had a rough week at school or a tough week at home, or whether they're dealing with some family issues or something that, maybe they don't want to talk about, but it's there, that's affecting their focus and, what they're like when they're inside the facility. Whether they're getting recruited and stressed out about it, or whether there's just a 12-year-old who loves baseball. That level of knowing doesn't require any sort of real system. It requires the coach to actually care enough to pay attention to that athlete and ask questions and create conversation. And when athletes feel known, like truly known, they're not going to leave. They're not going to go anywhere. They want to work with that coach, because you're not just a training facility anymore. You're part of their story. That coach is part of their story. And ideally, every coach that works inside your facility has a little bit of this. I can honestly say that I have several athletes that I've dealt with this on a pretty deep level with, and in some ways it's created its own issues. They're good problems to have, right? But there's been cases where I've worked with guys over the years one-on-one, and when I've gotten busy and started coaching more, or I had my baby daughter and had to spend time away, or I've been on vacation, that kid only wants to work with me because we built up such a good relationship together and they like the way we interact and the way we talk. So I say all this to say it's not really a bad problem to have. What you hope for, though, is that you have other coaches that embody the same culture, so that those particular kids, if they realize they can't work with you, they work with another coach that has the same genuine care. And that's really what matters here. We've had some guys that have been cut from teams, dealt with depression, family issues, that we've stood by during these times and watched guys come out of this. And the relationship that you build with those players beyond just the facility is really why this whole thing matters. And the genuine care shows up in those details. It's the coach who texts a kid after a rough tournament game, or after he knows they got cut or redshirted, or the assistant coach who reaches out and remembers that, a mom is having a tough time making payments or having a hard time financially and asks, hey, what can we do to help? A birthday shout out to a kid when he's coming in not expecting you to know it's his birthday. These are the coaches that are going to build true relationships. Watching extra film, going out to games. I can't tell you how many games our staff has been out to just to watch guys play. and we don't get paid for that, right? None of that stuff is expensive. None of it requires a bigger building or a better facility or a different budget. It just requires a decision. And the decision is that this is the kind of place that, we want to be at, and we want to work with these types of coaches. So retention is the profit metric that not too many people are talking about. One athlete who stays for 3 years is better than 3 athletes who stay for 1 year in revenue, in referrals, in everything. And, part of genuinely serving athletes is being honest with them. Not just telling every family what they want to hear, not overselling development, not overselling timelines, not just trying to keep athletes enrolled at any cost. And trust me, guys, I've been guilty of this. But the facilities that build deep trust and tell the hard truths when it's really hard to face the kid or the family and tell them that, being able to say, your son has real ability and here's what it's actually going to take, to do this or to do that, or, this athlete needs strength training, or this athlete needs more of this, or, hey, you're really falling short in this area. What you gain from that honesty is far more valuable. And it's a reputation that you actually give a damn about the outcomes and not just the revenue. And that reputation starts to spread in ways that no ad campaign or marketing ever could. And then there's a piece of the athlete buy-in too. And when athletes are actually bought in and they believe in what you're doing, they feel ownership. They feel ownership for their development, and they're engaged and progressing and proud to be a part of what you built. They start to become advocates then, not because you ask them to, because they want to. They truly believe in what you're doing. A bought-in athlete tells their teammates what they've got going on. Show up to optional sessions. Push back on their parents when the parents think about, switching programs or facilities or another team. That athlete with buy-in is going to be the most powerful thing for you. They're going to recruit for you without you knowing they're recruiting for you. When your athletes are bought in, your facility markets itself. Every game they play in, every team they're on, every conversation they have with another baseball guy, they're basically a billboard for this good culture that you've built. This is where I want to connect all of this, connect the dots between the genuine value and actual business leverage, right? That's the whole point of this conversation, is talking about how to gain more leverage. Because I think a lot of coaches, they understand the value piece intuitively, right? We'd be stupid not to. Most coaches are good people who actually care about the athletes. That's why you started coaching. But what they don't always see is how that value translates into leverage, and how that leverage translates into actual wealth and money in the bank for your business. And there's really 4 stages to this. Stage 1, value is going to create retention. And when you genuinely serve athletes and families, when the relationships are real, the results are real too. And that care that you give the athletes and the care they give you back is real, and people are going to stay. Your churn is not going to continue to go at such an alarming rate. And you stop kind of that hamster wheel of running in place and figuring out how many athletes you need, and revenue, all out of whack. Like, revenue starts to become way more predictable. Your acquisition costs go down because you're not constantly refilling a leaky bucket where guys are leaving every month. And a facility with high retention rates are going to be fundamentally different businesses than ones running with lower retention rates. And you can get into what some of those numbers need to look like, obviously, on paper for your business. But the same thing for revenue on paper. It's completely different stability when that retention rate stays high. It's going to create more referrals. Families who have been with you for 2, 3, 4 years don't just stay. They're going to talk about what they're doing. They're the ones who tell the coach at a travel ball tournament that your facility is the real deal and it's the best thing on the planet, and why their kid should go train there. Then their kid is recruiting a teammate because they genuinely love where they train and they want to bring their buddies there too. Stage 2, high retention is going to produce high quality referrals, and high quality referrals produce athletes who come in, already bought in, ready to train because they've heard about you from someone they trust. Families who've been with you for 2, 3, 4, maybe longer years, they don't just stay. They're going to talk too. They're the ones that are going to tell the coach at a travel ball tournament that your facility is the real deal and they should send all their players there. Their kid recruits another kid, another teammate, and they come and train with you because that kid genuinely loves where they train and they want their buddies coming there too. High retention produces high quality referrals. High quality referrals produce athletes who come in already bought in, ready to train because they've heard about you from someone else that they trust and they want to be in your facility. Stage 3, referrals and retention create capacity, and capacity creates pricing power, right? So we're always talking about filling up your facility and having a full facility. Well, when your facility is full or close to full, something changes. You stop being desperate for every sale and every athlete who walks in the door. You can be a little bit more selective and you can raise your prices to where they should be within reason without the panic of, hey, okay, maybe this athlete won't want to buy, so we just need to offer it at a lower price. And you want to be the facility that people are trying to get into, not the facility that's always kind of chasing people to come back in and stay longer. Stage 4, all of this compounds into something that you can actually build on. A facility with strong retention, steady referrals, real pricing power, and a true culture where the athletes are bought into what the facility offers, that facility has leverage in every single direction. Those are the facilities that are going to be able to add a second location from a position of strength instead of desperation. They're going to be able to hire more coaches who want to work there because the culture is real, not only with the athletes, but with the team. That's what real wealth inside a training facility looks like. Not just hitting a revenue number, but building something with genuine equity, community equity, relationship equity, brand equity. That compounds over time and eventually becomes something that you could sell and exit, you could license, or you could build on in ways that you haven't even imagined yet. And your growth and your scaling is really infinity. I want to be honest about why more facilities aren't in that spot though. And it's not because coaches don't care. Most coaches who open facilities care deeply about their athletes and what they're doing. The problem isn't heart. The problem is that as the business grows, the owner gets pulled in 10 different directions every single day and putting out fires. And the culture that was easy to maintain when maybe it was just that coach or you had a smaller amount of athletes with a lower number of coaches in a small space, it gets hard to replicate and to protect that when you start to scale that number. And the genuine care that was super automatic when you knew every single athlete personally has to become a little bit more intentional when your facility is running multiple programs with 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the number of athletes, multiple coaches. Maybe you don't get to see every session. It has to be a true system, a true standard that you implement, a set of expectations that every person on your staff understands and the athletes understand, and the staff and the athletes are accountable to holding that culture. And your culture is either something you design intentionally or something that happens by default. And default cultures in growing businesses almost always drift towards transactional. You have to be intentional about your culture. Our business, scaling the culture, honestly, was a lot harder than scaling the revenue for us. Revenue responds to systems and it responds to marketing, responds to good business. Culture responds to leadership. And leadership is a daily practice, not a one-time decision, and it has to come from every single coach. So, the practical question here is, as your facility grows, what are you doing to protect that thing that made it so special in the first place? What are your coach is being held to beyond, their technical skills and abilities? What are your standards for how athletes are treated and how they communicate and how the coaches communicate with them and how they're developed? Is any of that written down? Is any of that documented? Is any of it measured in any way? And I think it's safe to say that everything I've talked about, up to this point is kind of the foundation for your facility, and the genuine care and the relationships and the culture, the athlete buying in. That stuff has to be real before anything else matters. But here's the thing, and this is super important. You can have all that and still not build wealth if you don't put the right business structure on top of it. I've seen facilities with incredible cultures and loyal athletes that were still struggling financially. Maybe their rent got raised or doubled, and that's out of their control. And this didn't happen because they weren't valuable and they weren't good coaches and they didn't deeply care about their athletes. But it happened because at some point their revenue and their profit and their offers got out of whack. Maybe their pricing was too low. The model wasn't built properly to scale. The marketing wasn't bringing in new athletes to replace natural attrition. Even with the best of cultures, you're going to have natural attrition. And the culture and the value created the foundation, but the business systems are going to turn that foundation into something that you can actually grow and scale and compound financially. Now, I'll say this, when the value is real and the business is built right, the two things work together in a way that most facility owners never get to experience. The culture fills the programs. The programs fund the culture. And it's this circular thing that is super powerful, and the whole thing builds on itself as you go. Honestly, if I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, at the very beginning of, building our athletic facility, it would probably be this. The business stuff matters. The marketing, the offers, the pricing, the systems, the automations, all of it matters. And you have to take it seriously, right? That without that business stuff, you're not going to last very long. But none of it works the way it's supposed to work without the thing underneath of it being real. And athletes are genuinely cared for. They're genuinely developed. They're genuinely connecting to something that they believe in. When that happens, they're not going to leave. Those athletes don't leave. They don't shop around. They stay. They grow with you. They send their friends, and they become part of the story of you building this facility. That's true leverage. Not the ads, not the funnels, not the pricing strategy. Although all of those things do matter, the leverage is the irreplaceable thing that you built that nobody can walk in and duplicate because it took years of genuine investment to create. Build that first. Build it every day. And then put the right business structures behind it, on top of it, all around it. But at the core, you have to have that culture. When you can do both, your wealth is going to grow. And the staying power for your athletes is real. And the thing that you've built is worth something that goes, far beyond the monthly revenue number. I can honestly say that I'm proud that we have athletes training with us still in 2026 that were training with us when we started our business in 2017. That is the culture that I'm talking about here. If you're thinking about your facility right now and asking, whether the foundation is as strong as it needs to be, or, whether the business layer on top of it is actually working for you, I'd love to get on a call with you. I work one-on-one daily with facility owners to look at both sides of this thing, the culture and the commercial, the value and the vehicle to turn that value into something that builds true wealth. There's a link below. Grab a time. We'll have a conversation about, where your facility is right now and where you want to go, and, what the honest path is to get you from where you're at now to where you want to go. You guys go ahead and drop a comment. Tell me what's the thing that, your athletes and your families are saying about your facility that you're the most proud of. That type of thing is usually the seed of the leverage that we need to grow. I'd love to hear it. Subscribe if you guys want more content that's built for facility owners who are serious about building something real. See you guys on the next one.